Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. You're standing on a rugged shore. The wind is biting, carrying this incredibly sharp, clean smell of salt air, and you can hear the rhythmic crash of the ocean against ancient, weathered stones. Today, we're taking a virtual trip to the wild, windswept west coast of Scotland to check out a place that is just full of astonishing contradictions. On the one hand, it's this tiny, remote little speck of land out in the Inner Hebrides, but on the other hand, it's an absolute giant in global history, basically known as the cradle of Scottish Christianity. We're talking, of course, about the Isle of Iona. How in the world did such a small island become this massive epicenter of religion, art, and pilgrimage for more than 1,500 years? And better yet, how can you go and experience that magic for yourself today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
All right, let's just lay out exactly what we're covering today. First, the journey to the Sacred Isle, then its centuries of epic history, discovering the key attractions, some optimal travel itineraries to help you plan, and finally, a look at some important travel challenges.
Starting right off with Section 1, Journey to the Sacred Isle, and getting to the Inner Hebrides. So getting to Iona really isn't like just hopping in an Uber to go visit a museum. It demands a true modern-day pilgrimage. It forces you to slow down and literally match the rhythm of the Scottish Islands. And what's wild is just how incredibly small this legendary place is. Iona sits just off the west coast of the much larger Isle of Mull. It's a mere 3 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. The year-round population? Only about 120 people. But hey, do not let that tiny size fool you. The moment you step off the ferry, you're hit with this visual palette that almost looks tropical. I'm serious. The beaches are made up of crushed shells and quartz, which gives the sand this blindingly white, pristine look that perfectly offsets these Caribbean-like turquoise waters and the deep, rolling green hills. It has this deeply tranquil atmosphere that just instantly unplugs you from the mainland hustle. You know, that unique atmosphere was brilliantly described by the Reverend George MacLeod. He was this visionary 20th century minister who spearheaded the massive effort to rebuild the island's abbey. He famously called Iona a thin place. Now, that's a fascinating cultural concept. It basically means that on Iona, the veil separating the material world from the spiritual world is so incredibly thin, it's like tissue paper. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need to follow any specific religion to feel it. Every single year, thousands of visitors from all over the globe, from all walks of life, come here simply because the island just radiates this profound, almost unexplainable sense of peace. But how do you actually cross over into that thin place? Well, it takes some real effort. First up, you've got to take a large ferry from the mainland town of Oban, crossing over to Cregner on the Isle of Mull. Then, you have to literally drive across Mull to get to the port of Fionfort. That drive takes about an hour and 15 minutes, and a lot of it is on twisting single-track roads. You'll be dodging roaming sheep, navigating passing places, and honestly, probably waiting on a Highland cow or two to get out of the way. Finally, you jump on a tiny 10-minute foot passenger ferry to cross the Sound of Iona. And unless you're a resident with a special permit, you leave your car behind. This whole multi-stage transit is absolutely crucial. The journey itself sets the tone, kind of stripping away all your modern conveniences before you even arrive. Moving on to Section 2, Centuries of Epic History, from Saints to Vikings. This second your boots hit the pier, you are walking on top of 1,500 years of intense history. Back in 563 AD, this Irish monk of royal blood named Saint Columba showed up with 12 companions. They built a simple little monastery out of wood and thatch, and it rapidly grew into this massive beacon of learning. But of course, wealth and prominence usually attract danger. By the late 8th and 9th centuries, the island was getting hammered by Viking raids. There was a horrific attack in 806 AD where 68 monks were martyred. The bay where that happened is actually still called Martyrs Bay today. Eventually, that Columban era gave way, and around the year 1200, the Lords of the Isles founded a Grand Benedictine Abbey and an Augustinian nunnery. They thrived there until the Scottish Reformation of 1560, which basically left the magnificent buildings totally in ruins. But miraculously, in 1938, the modern Iona community began an incredible ecumenical restoration. They brought together different Christian denominations to painstakingly rebuild the abbey back to its former glory. It's really important to remember that during its early golden age, Iona wasn't just a place where monks prayed. It was a high-end center for technology, art, and education. The monks extracted pigments from local minerals and plants to create these absolutely stunning illuminated manuscripts. The most legendary of them all is the Book of Kells. It was crafted around the year 800, right there on Iona, before the monks had to secretly smuggle it over to Ireland to save it from those relentless Viking attacks. And just to put the wealth of this tiny island monastery into perspective, it reportedly took the skins of over 150 calves just to make the vellum for that one single manuscript. Unbelievable. That brings us to Section 3, Discovering the Key Attractions, Walking the Street of the Dead. Okay, so with all that history literally beneath your feet, what should you actually prioritize seeing when you visit? First off, the Iona Abbey Church. Its current architecture is a beautiful mix of 13th to 16th century styles, and it's actually an active, living place of worship today. It's packed with intricate stone carvings and has this incredible atmosphere of reverence. Right next door is Rila Godran. For centuries, people honestly believed that being buried in Iona's sacred soil was a guaranteed ticket to heaven. Because of that, royal bodies were shipped across dangerous, stormy oceans just to be buried there. History and myth tell us that 48 early Scottish, Irish, and Norwegian kings are interred right in that spot, including the real-life King Macbeth. As you walk up from the ferry, you'll also wander right past the wonderfully preserved 13th century ruins of the Augustan Nunnery. Oh, and you absolutely cannot miss St. Martin's Cross. It's an original 8th century Celtic high cross carved from one massive single slab of stone, and it has stood there watching over the island for more than 1,200 years. While you're exploring the Abbey grounds, make a point to step up onto Torun Abba. It's this small, rocky hill situated right outside the main church, known as the Hill of the Abbot. Archaeologists have actually discovered the burnt remains of a wooden structure right there that dates all the way back to Columba's time. So, it's widely believed to be the exact spot where the saint had his writing hut and personal cell. Standing up on that little hill doesn't just connect you straight back to the 6th century, it also gives you a truly spectacular sweeping view over the entire Abbey complex and the sparkling water beyond. But remember, the magic of Iona isn't just about the man-made stuff. The natural beauty is just staggering. Head north and you'll hit the white strand of the Monks, which has that incredibly soft, quartz-rich white sand I mentioned earlier. If you walk west, you'll find the dramatically named bay at the back of the ocean. That area features this really rare, highly fertile coastal grassland called mahair, which is pretty much only found in the Hebrides. And then way down in the far south is St. Columba's Bay. It takes a bit of a hike to get there, but this pebbly beach is exactly where Columba's little coracle boat, basically a primitive vessel made of animal skin stretched over a wooden frame, first made landfall back in 563 AD. The contrast of those bright Caribbean-colored waters crashing against the harsh, rugged Scottish landscape, it's something that'll stay with you forever. Moving right along to Section 4, Optimal Travel Itineraries. Let's talk about maximizing your time on the island. So, with everything there is to see, how do you actually plan your visit? Well, most people do Iona as a day trip. And if that's your plan, you've got to be focused. You'll definitely have time to wander through the nunnery ruins, fully check out the Abbey and its museum, and maybe have a picnic at one of those closer northern beaches. But you have to keep a super strict eye on the afternoon ferry schedule because you definitely do not want to get stranded. Now, on the flip side, an overnight stay completely changes the game. Once that last ferry full of day trippers leaves, this deep, profound silence settles over the island. You finally have the time to tackle the longer hike down to St. Columba's Bay. You can explore those ancient ruins with practically no one else around, and just soak it all in under a totally brilliant Hebridean night sky. A quick heads up though, hotel rooms and campsites are incredibly limited on the island. If you want to stay overnight, you really need to book months in advance. When it comes to budgeting for the sites themselves, just keep this number in mind, £10. That is the current standard adult entrance fee for the Abbey complex, which is beautifully managed by Historic Environment Scotland. And the great part is, that £10 usually includes a very comprehensive audio guide. I highly recommend using it. It really helps decode the layers and layers of history hidden inside those ancient stones. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, important travel challenges. We're looking at logistics, mobility, and weather. We really want to be upfront here and make sure you're fully prepared for the physical realities of this trip. It's a critical question. Is this journey accessible for everyone? What if you're bringing young kids, or you're an older traveler, or someone in your group has limited mobility? The truth is, while Iona is wonderfully welcoming, its ancient, unpaved infrastructure does require some serious logistical planning. So here's exactly what you need to prepare for. First, like we said, no visitor cars. Once you're off the ferry, you're exploring strictly on foot or by renting a bicycle. Second, you are going to encounter a lot of uneven terrain. The Street of the Dead has old cobblestones, the ruins are rocky, and the footpaths can get pretty muddy. Third, everything takes a good amount of walking. Just reaching those pristine beaches is a 20 to 30 minute hike from the Abbey. Now, if you are traveling with kids or folks with mobility constraints, a fantastic tip is to just take frequent breaks at the little local village cafes right near the ferry terminal. It makes the uneven ground way more manageable if you can't do the big hikes. Fourth, remember you're on an exposed island in the Hebrides. The weather is notoriously changeable. It can get incredibly windy and rainy, even in the dead of summer. And lastly, just reaching the ferry means doing that long, stressful single-track drive on the Isle of Mull. But look, don't see these as negatives. They're just essential planning factors. Grab some sturdy boots, pack your waterproof layers, and take it at your own pace. And that actually brings us to a really fascinating, provocative thought to end on. When you look at all those logistical hurdles, you kind of have to ask yourself, does the sheer effort of the journey inherently create the magic of the destination? Think about it. If Iona had a giant airport or some massive multi-lane bridge connecting it to the mainland, would it still feel like a thin place? Honestly, probably not. The arduous travel, the wild winds, the physical effort it takes just to walk the island, that is exactly what preserves its 1,500-year-old tranquility. It actually asks something of you before it reveals its secrets. And for the thousands of people who make the pilgrimage to its white sands and ancient stones every year, I can tell you the reward is absolutely 100% worth the effort. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.